Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of these conversational pieces that I promised that I'd put out there for you. And today we're going to cover a topic which is a hot potato, really, which is AI and GDPR. And let's face it, if you're on any kind of social media platform at the moment, especially if you're on something like LinkedIn, probably one in every 3 posts will mention AI, and it will talk about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And, you know, people have a lot of different opinions on it. Quite rightly so. It's changing the whole landscape of business. It's changing the way that we do business. But today is just a little bit of exploration. We won't go the whole hog because no one ever can on one of these things. But we're going to start exploring a little bit as to how does this stuff actually work and what's going on behind the bonnet. So I brought a couple of people that know a little bit more than I do to the space to talk about this. So we've got Tom Lewis and Paul Binning. Thanks for joining me today to talk about AI. So let's start just by getting to know you both a little bit better so that the audience know what your credentials are, if you like, for speaking about this. So Tom, tell us a bit about you.
My name's Tom. I run a company called Halo. We've been going for about just over 9 years now. Amongst other things, I am also I'm a Google trainer. So I've been a certified trainer for about 8 years with Google, which essentially is just a bit of a stamp of approval to say I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Google Workspace stuff. And more recently, been doing a lot more work around Google Gemini and a host of other AI platforms, really.
Fantastic. And Paul, you?
Yeah, it's Paul. I run a company called Star Solutions, and since 2017, I've been a GDPR practitioner. So I went and sat in a room with a lawyer for a week and went through line by line, 80-something pages of legislation. And what I tried to do over the last number of years is take that legislation and try and remove a lot of the complexity to it and the technical stuff of it, and try and address with smaller businesses what they really need to know, what really affects their business, what the day-to-day activities are, and what the day-to-day processes might be that they need to affect and change, rather than worry about what Google and Microsoft, whoever else are doing with something. It's more about what your local independent businesses might be.
I'm going to just say, because I'm old enough to know all of this, right, that GDPR, when that came in, that was one of those moments, and I think AI is now another one of those moments where, like, everybody in business panicked. Right?
Yeah.
I remember, like, when DSE, display screen equipment assessments, came out, and HSE started to publish guidelines around the need to assess working practices in terms of health and safety, and all of these leaflets used to come out. It was still in the day of leaflets. We didn't have the internet then. And people, they would land in envelopes on people's desks, and suddenly you'd see, business leaders panicking and sweating. It's like, oh, am I doing this? Am I doing that? And with all of these things, there's obviously an element of common sense. There's an element by which nobody's necessarily expecting you to do everything overnight. It's about getting processes and policies into place and learning to do the right thing. But everyone always panics. Did you see that? Did you feel that when, like, GDPR first was talked about, etc.?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I think the best example, I guess, of panic was Sports Direct, who actually binned a 750,000 database because they didn't really know how they'd pulled it together and what rights they did or didn't have. So they went from 750,000 clients to zero on their database overnight, and that's on a large scale, obviously. But it was madness, but there was a lot there. If I'm totally honest, I think a lot of small businesses don't really fully do it properly even yet. But the ICO have always been very clear: as long as you're taking steps to do what you should be doing and are aware of your responsibilities and taking the time to look at it, they're going to largely be a little bit more friendly towards you than they will be if they turn up on some sort of complaint or some sort of investigation and you don't even know what GDPR really is.
Yeah. So Tom, like, AI, it's there now in pretty much every business, right? Yeah. In some shape or form. Okay. Do you, when you start talking to people about it, do people really actually understand how it's handling data?
No. No, there's so many misconceptions about it. It's a big question in terms of, it's not just like AI is not one thing. There's we were talking about QuickBooks earlier. There's AI embedded into QuickBooks. You've got AI standalone, ChatGPT, Gemini, things like that. A lot of these things, I suppose, shouldn't be just called AI. It's like referring to everything as technology. There's so many nuances between the different platforms. You could be giving your data some random website that says they're going to use AI to cut the amount of work you do in half in a week and stuff like that. And if you're giving your data to people like that, it's going to be treated in a completely different way than if you're giving your data to somebody like Copilot or Gemini. But no, for the most part, I don't think people really know what's happening. And there's so many misconceptions about what happens with their data once you enter it into. When I'm talking about AI, I try to remind people what I'm talking about is essentially the four main ones, which would be ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, and Claude. Other than that, it starts to get muddier and complicated. So when I refer to is your business or are you using AI, it's essentially, are you using one of those four, as opposed to are you using any software that's got an AI sticker on the side of it now, which basically means everything.
Yeah. The thing is that as these technology advancements happen, is that they just make everything so easy to do that it's very easy to see where like compliance might slip, because we're not even perhaps noticing that we're doing it. I think that's the key to it. I mean, I was talking about this the other day. If you've got a spreadsheet, you mentioned it right at the beginning, Paul. If you've got a spreadsheet of people that are potential clients or our clients, etc., so you've got all of that personal data, etc. Now, years ago, if we were asked to sort that, which I've been in many positions as BDM or whatever within a business where the director said, "Look, I need you to sort out our database," and you just thought, "Oh my word, this is weeks of work," right? And you'd literally have that spreadsheet in front of you, and you'd be sorting through and cleaning out the data and working out what's good and what's bad, etc. That was a long job. Nowadays, if I wanted to, I could chuck that into a piece of AI and I could say, "This is what I want you to do. Look at this, etc., etc." Clean it up, and it would do it in a matter of moments, and it would give me a clean set of data out of that, set to my parameters in no time at all. What I'm not thinking about at that point in time when I'm doing that is what's happening to that data when I put that into that piece of software to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the way I would advise clients when I'm talking to them about it is almost just see AI as another CRM system. So if you've got a CRM system existing at the moment and you're putting data in and you're storing it and you're processing it and you're using it for whatever you want to, it's just like having another system in a sense of the GDPR law. So if there's personal data in there, and it's got to be data that's identifiable. So you're right, if it's typically a client database of names and addresses and emails and phone numbers, you have to do exactly what you do with a CRM database, what you do with your general marketing, your general information management within your business with AI, because you're just putting that personal data in. Obviously, if it's commercial data, if it's anonymized somehow, that's a completely different matter and it doesn't fall into GDPR. And that would probably be, one of my key takeaways from this sort of discussion would be where you can make sure it's anonymized, because as soon as it becomes commercial, that's your risk then as a business, as opposed to you're not risking anyone else's personal data in the same way. But yeah, you've got to understand how you can be transparent with the people whose data is going into it. You've got to understand where it's going to go and be stored, how it's going to be processed, the vendor or the software provider you're using, how are they going to use it? Have they got terms in place? Are they understanding it? Now, they all should have, because all these massive organizations that have got these policies in place, but you need to be aware what might happen to that if you're putting it in, for sure.
Yeah. Is that getting more complex, though, in terms of structure now that this is, because obviously the other thing that we haven't talked about here already, but I'm going to bring in a little bit now, is that, once upon a time, we'd know that things were physically kept on premises, right? But within this period of time as well, everything has moved to cloud, right? So nobody, I don't think people are still using any kind of physical hard drive or whatever to store
they are.
things.
Yeah, we
are
are.
they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But but then do you know what I'm saying? So there may be areas of grey there as well in terms of, is it being kept physically somewhere? And then if it's being kept in the cloud, what's the protection of that, and where is that being stored? And, geographically, where is it being stored as well? Yeah. Do all of these things start to come in?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I've done quite a bit with people training on basic cybersecurity, and working with schools on things like e-safety. And the takeaway that I hope people take from my sessions is they don't need to necessarily understand how the cloud works. Basically means your data is not being kept where you are. But the fact that it's on the cloud probably makes it, well, there's almost no argument for it really. It is safer than if it was being kept on USB pens and hard drives with you, with the caveat that you don't use password 123 as your password, and you have basic cybersecurity principles, and you have unique passwords. You use two-factor authentication where possible, and you literally step one to go and get Cyber Essentials, for example. Which, as an aside, if every business went out and followed Cyber Essentials, it's in my head because I literally renewed ours yesterday. But if every business goes and just gets the basic Cyber Essentials certification, that will put you kind of head and shoulders above everybody who isn't. So from a data security perspective, if it's going in the cloud, as long as you take basic security steps, it's probably safer than having it on USB pens and hard drives around your home or your office. And I think with your question, more focused around AI, it matters, like Paul was saying, about what vendor you're using. Like I said, I pretty much stick to being the four that I mentioned. If you're using Office 365 or you're using Google Workspace, if you've got a paid account for those, I don't mean just a free Outlook account. I mean, if you've got a paid for subscription for something like Workspace or Office 365, your data within those AI platforms is treated in the same way as the data you put into OneDrive.
Yeah.
So when you say about misconceptions, a lot of people think, well, every bit of data you're feeding into an AI platform is being used to train that AI platform. And in some cases, that is the case. If you've used a free version of a platform, just like the free version of ChatGPT, for example, that data can be used to train the models. But if you're paying for something like Google Workspace, you're paying for Office 365, your data is treated in the same way being used by the AI platforms as it is when you just upload it into OneDrive, as far as they say. And that's the thing, is that I never tell people that I can guarantee that, but it's what their terms and conditions say anyway. So if you're happy to put your data on the cloud with OneDrive or Google Drive, if you're using those same platforms under the same paid terms and conditions, your data is treated in the same way with those platforms as well, with the AIs.
Yeah. It is part of the risk pool now that the interconnection of all of these tools as well, because I remember back in the day when we first talked about GDPR, for example, one of the things that kept coming up on forums, etc., was how you used email, for example. Yeah. What procedures were you using within email to make sure that you weren't accidentally or couldn't even accidentally send data that you had internally to somebody else's email outside of the organization that shouldn't have it? But when, if you like, you've got this third party connected up within a structure like Microsoft Teams or Google Workspace or whatever, that's actually then potentially helping you construct and then look and then send and then organize things like email. Again, so then who's to blame for that if that goes wrong? And where does that come back down to?
Yeah, so this really is the essence of whether you're the data controller or data processor in that sense. And if you are putting your client or employee data, always remember employee data falls into GDPR as much as client data does, and suppliers and whatever else. If you're choosing to put that data into a system, the system's just doing what you're asking it to do essentially. So they're the data processor, and you're controlling what happens to that data. You're controlling where it ends up, where it goes. Yeah, I think that's a really key element. One of the things I would always suggest a business does is have a formal data processing agreement with anyone who does it. Now, I know from experience, and I'm sure Tom will too, trying to get that out of a big company in California is a lot easier said than done, and it's not going to happen in reality. You're not going to get them. So what you do need to do is have due diligence and do your own investigation. I would always recommend, if you're starting to use a system like this, doing a DPIA, a data protection impact assessment, like you would if you were using a new piece of IT. So we are going to be putting our data into this new system. These are the risks. We know there are risks. There are risks with anything you do in life. We think we can manage those risks by doing X, Y, Z, and understanding what you're doing. And again, I think it's really important you really build that sort of stuff then into your internal training, into your internal assessments and your policies. So how many companies got a data protection policy? Some, not a lot. How many have a specific sort of data accuracy sort of type thing where you're actually looking at who's doing what? For instance, one example, I come across a company who are loading a load of CVs into AI to assess a candidate. They have their job description. They had about 110 CVs, and they were doing it. I said, why don't you just take their names and their addresses and their phone number bits out? And that's not any personal data. It's a really simple thing. But you take out that top paragraph of a CV, and you can do all of that fairly reasonably, fairly rationally. And yes, there might be something somewhere lower down in that data that is a bit more identifiable, but generally you're taking all that risk out from a GDPR point of view, and you're just, you can do things. You can obviously code that in a separate list somewhere, who's which CV. So there are always ways of doing something. I think the challenge that most organizations would have is, and it is my mantra, and I do probably bore people saying it, but if you don't train your staff about how to do these things, they won't do it. They'll do it in a way that just seems the most obvious way, and they won't necessarily think about anonymization or coding the data or a different way of doing something just to be a bit more protective, because they'll do the most straightforward, obvious thing. And that's where training and that's where internal policies really come to the fore.
And that's really interesting, because actually, I mean, I think that's one of the first conversations you and I had, Tom, which is that it seems to me that with AI being rolled out into businesses, it's kind of I think businesses don't feel like it's being actually rolled out half the time. I think they just buy into it, but I don't see that there's, within a lot of organizations, there is the actual training going on in terms of this is now a new piece of kit. If you put out, like years ago, if you put out a new accounts package, you would work your way, and you'd think about it beforehand. You'd work your way through the business and go, who would need access to this? What does that access look like? What training is needed for each of those different stakeholders in order to get the best use out of this? And you'd implement policies and procedures around it before it even went out. Nowadays,
I think lots of businesses see that they should be using it. They think they should be using AI because it's everywhere. Yeah. And I think we'll fall behind if we don't use it. So the problem people have is that they think, oh, we should be using AI as well. And then, right, okay, for what? What do you want to use it for? Well, we want to use AI. It'll make us more efficient. It'll do X, Y, What do you actually want it to do? That's what they've got. You've got to look at the business case for using it and what areas you want. You can't just wake up one day and decide, right, our business now is going to start using AI and we're going to become 50% more efficient because that's what some of these AI platforms claim they'll do for us. So start using AI from tomorrow, staff, get using it. Like, for what? So if there's no plan on, it should be aligned basically with, what are your business goals for the next 12 months? What areas of those are very repetitive or data heavy, don't require a lot of personality and things to do, like organizing a database, for example. what stuff aligns with what we're trying to achieve that AI can assist with and take away some of the time-consuming parts that we don't do. Just coming in one day and saying, yeah, we're going to start using AI because, you know, Joe Blogs down the road's company is using AI and they're going to leapfrog us. You can't just kind of flick a switch and suddenly everything becomes done by AI for a business. There has to be a plan for how it's going to be used.
I guess, Tom, the threat's dual in that sense. You've got the way where businesses say we're doing this because we want to and it's going to be great for us. The far other end of the scale is Joe Blogg sitting in a corner in an office in, you know, Sheffield when his headquarters in San Francisco and Dubai, doing what he wants to do because he used a bit of chat GPT and chucked some information into it. And then there's no control, is there, as an organisation? So that's for the two ends of that, really, isn't it? It's how you control that whilst also rolling out a genuine business requirement.
Yeah. I mean, there's easy wins. You know, people can just use AI for rewriting emails and stuff like that. But that's not going to really transform how it'll save a few minutes here and there, but it's not embedding it and like you said, Graham, about training people on how to use it and making sure that it's like I hate using buzzwords, but an actually strategic plan on how they're going to use it to support the business, basically.
Well, I think some of it will be that there's a different kind of training that needs to go on here as well, because I'm certain that the software or the solutions now, these AI solutions, they're changing so fast, they're transforming so fast that actually you almost can't just do like a set of, you know, preliminary training and then this is how you use it and then get on with it. You've almost got to have a more organic form of training which continually comes back to the users of that and go, how are you using it as well? Can we look at those, you know, or how are you thinking of using this now, knowing where it's going and its capabilities, and then actually looking at each of those and going, well, hang on a minute, before you do that, we need to consider as an organization this. Yeah. So
I mean, what? Oh, go on, sorry, go finish up.
No.
That was
just different.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when the training that I do, because although I'm a Google trainer, for quite a few reasons, the training that I do on AI isn't just Gemini focused. It's trying to be as agnostic for the platform as possible, and it's fundamental skills on communicating with this as a software platform. So it talks about what is prompting, how does it work well, what are master prompts, what are agents, it doesn't matter that Gemini call them gems and ChatGPT call them GPTs and things. That's just what they call them. It's in the same way that people could have learned how to use Microsoft Word, they would also know how to use Pages and Google Docs and OpenOffice for the most part. And I had a conversation with a business that I'm going in to help in March, where I didn't have a structured training platform that I could go in and say, right, this is what I'm going to train you on. I needed them to give me a list of the people I was going to sit down with and what their job roles are, what they entail now, what their pain points are, so that when I go in, I'm not just going in and saying, let's build agents, let's do this, let's do that. It's let's look at what you do. Where are the areas that we can slot AI in that can help with that? Sometimes it might be building agents for them, but it's looking at what fits for that business, not just doing things because there's no set way to do it. It really depends on how that business operates and how AI can specifically help them.
Yeah. Paul, do you think a part of the problem here is the way that AI is being sold to us as well? And the reason I say that is because I'm pretty certain that the way that it's sold at sort of C-suite level in terms of, you know, looking at the overall friction within the processes, etc., for a workforce and seeing where it can save is thought about and constructed in a very different way to how it's being sold to people on the ground. You mentioned, oh, what about somebody over here, you know, that's working remotely for this organization. I don't know whether both of you have looked at a lot of AI adverts that are aimed at the sort of end user, but a lot of them are sort of like, you know, a couple of women, you know, in an office, and they come in for the day and they go, oh, oh, well, we don't really have to do anything today. We can just paint our nails and drink coffee all day long because we've now got this piece of software, and now we don't have to think about the task. We can press a button and it will do the task. But the problem I see with all of that is that actually that area of responsibility for work is being sold to people as like, well, you're not responsible anymore. You can kind of enjoy your day and then go home. So do you think that that's part of the problem here as well? There's a kind of cultural problem around this.
I guess potentially, yes. And I think Tom alluded to it earlier. If you're bringing a new system, you need to have steps and a program in place and a way that you're going to introduce it and how you're going to introduce it. And having, if you're putting a new IT system in, a new sort of, organization-wide IT system, you'd have champions and people who go around different teams showing other people how to use it and where they might apply it and how they might apply it. So I think if you've got someone who's going to be doing that, I guess it's better and it's more likely to be effective. But yes, if you're just bringing in a new thing to use that's supposed to be great and you're just saying go and have a look at it, have a play with it, then you're not going to have that control. And GDPR is all about that control and those processes and how you manage your staff and manage the data that they manage themselves. And without those guidelines, it can certainly be that potentially. I can see that.
Yeah. Tom, I think you were going to say something there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to don't believe the hype, really, isn't it? There's lots of software out there that'll tell you, I'm not going to name names, but all your emails done by 9 o'clock. You got no emails left to look at. And you haven't even come into work yet. And it's like some of these pieces of software are good. They are potentially good things that people can use. I've tried them. There's lots of good ones out there. But they spoil it with the marketing. They make it out. There's the whole culture thing, isn't it, of trying to essentially retire at 25 or whatever, or how can I just have completely passive income where I chuck a few videos up on YouTube and I'm a millionaire. I bought that guy's course who said I was going to do that, and I've now lost loads of money. There's a whole industry based on trying to get people to believe they can earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a year by spending 5 minutes a day doing this one simple thing. And AI falls perfectly into that to better market to people and say, yeah, you don't need to come into work anymore. AI can do it for you. That's not a thing to be celebrated, because if you're in a role where you can be replaced by AI, which I'm sure that there are roles that can be replaced by AI, and we can go into the ethical concerns about that for hours, but that's not necessarily how you want to position your company, I don't think, as we can do away with all these employees that you don't need anymore, because you do. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are roles that can just out and out be replaced. We were talking about like data analysis and things like that is something that I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, someone who's a data analyst, but I would imagine that a very high proportion of that stuff can be done faster and more accurately by a computer program, something like AI. But yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to don't believe the hype and actually look at what do you want to achieve with this AI? What is it that you want to get out of it? Does this, whatever software platform it is, AI or not, does it do the things that we want it to do? And then also, does it do that by us paying them or by stealing our data and selling it and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, and just as back in the old days where salespeople sorted through databases by hand, it's still the same thing: rubbish in, rubbish out. So good data is still going to be good data, whether whoever or whatever is looking at it as well. Question for you, Paul. We're getting towards end of time as well, so I'll be fairly quick with this, but I thought this is quite an interesting one. There might be people watching this go, well, okay, so we've got AI in place. We now know from this conversation that we need to be concerned about the training and the GDPR. But maybe we can use the AI to look at the GDPR as we go along, and we can get it to look at the training. But that in itself isn't necessarily going to work, is it?
I think, like AI can do in a lot of areas, it can provide you a very good broad principle of how you can do stuff, the structure you can take, the process you can take to do that. One of my biggest bugbears as a GDPR advisor, trainer, whatever it might be, is people taking a privacy policy offer template and saying, there you go, we've done GDPR. Now, if you've got something in your terms and conditions and you've got no idea what it says in paragraph 3 because you haven't written it yourself and you don't know and you don't really understand half the terminology in that policy because you've just brought it off the internet, it's absolutely pointless other than having it on your website. So all my training and all that internal work, again, we've got to follow a similar path. You can have internal documents set up, you can have internal training sessions set up. If you don't really understand it and you're not in particular making it specific for your organization, how you do things, it's not really worth the paper it's written on. It really isn't. And what I would say about AI, it generally, it doesn't change any of your GDPR obligations. As I said earlier, it's just something you've still got to have a lawful base for doing so. You've still got to process it transparently and fairly. You've got to secure the data. You've got to limit how you use it. You've got to have accountability. All the same principles, the pillars you talk about in GDPR. Yeah, they're absolutely no different. It's just how you're using this new piece of software and who's using it and where they're using it and how they're managing that. But yeah, I use AI quite a lot, as I say. And again, if coming back to personal data wise, if you're developing a training program and a structure of how to introduce AI into your business, no harm in that at all. That's not any personal data, actually, from a GDPR point of view. But like anything, you need someone who knows what they're looking at and someone who can sense check that to make sure it's useful for you and your organization. And then you're putting the relevant protections in place, post doing that as well.
I think talking about policies, I think the risk is that people think that they can just get AI to write their policy and that be it. I mean, I very rarely ever take the output from AI and use it. I'll use it as basically getting me out. I use AI a lot of the time when it comes to writing to get me away from that blank page problem where, for me, I'll give you an example. I was working with a school and they didn't have a policy on using personal devices to access school data. And I said, here's a really good example of how AI can help you. I mean, I could have sat down and written that policy. I know that space. I could have written the policy, but I'm not a policy writer. So it would have rambled and done like my talking and my emails do. They go off on tangents and then forget where I was meant to be heading. So I know the information, but couldn't put it down into a policy. So I went to Gemini in their Google education domain and I said, we need a policy on using personal devices to access school data. And I gave it lots of parameters, what it should cover, what headings and things should be in there, what should be considered. And then it gave me a policy. I then went through 8 pages, something like that, read it all, amended any bits that I thought, not too sure about that, highlighted bits that the way I presented it to the head teacher was, here's a policy. You should read it in its entirety before you start using it. But you should pay special attention to these bits that I've highlighted because those are key decisions that you need to make. Now, the difference there is it saved me hours and hours of time, gave me a document that was much better than I could have written myself, but that formatted in a nice way that was easy to then go through and proofread, essentially. We've got policies on our website, like our environmental policy. We're 2 people who work from home offices. Our environmental policy is we try to recycle where we can. We're paperless. We don't burn fossil fuels to power our home office. I don't know. There's not a lot we could include in it, really. So I got AI to write me a suitable environmental policy for our situation. And then went through and just made sure it had the right details in. But it was like a 1.5 pages long. It's really good for stuff like that. But we paid a law firm to write our terms and conditions of business for the company. And we sat down on at least 2 video calls, which were probably an hour each, where we explained the ins and outs of everything that needed to be covered. They sent them over. This is slightly before AI, but we sent them back and we went through this process. Now, I trust that terms and conditions document will stand up if it needs to. I wouldn't put that same faith in a document like that to ChatGPT or Gemini, because I don't have the technical know how to then proofread it and check it all, basically. So it gives you a really good starting point. And for stuff that's low level and isn't super important for you, but it's just a tick box, by all means go through it, but please read them before you just copy and paste it to your website.
Well, I think this is my biggest sort of gripe with how people are using AI, and I think it's the kind of the biggest warning out there. Really, is that, you know, I think if you've got people that know how to do this stuff before they input it into any AI system, then I think you've got a chance that what you're going to get out at the other end is going to be okay, because you're going to have somebody that brings their knowledge and their experience and everything else to the table to check and look at that piece of work, whatever that piece of work is. If you start employing people to just press buttons without any head knowledge of what they're actually pressing buttons around, that's the biggest risk here. That's where everything is at risk, because ultimately, you know, the mistakes are going to happen. And we've seen that recently within you, Paul, you probably know about the West Midlands police story about, yeah, exactly, of it picking up, you know, stuff in the background and not being looked at, and then it just escalating. You know, that's what's going to happen if people aren't allowed to think in the process. And people aren't allowed to sense check what the output is. Your
example there, Graham, sort of really neatly fits one of the explanations I give to AI, and it is like the Industrial Revolution. And we talked about jobs earlier. You know, you've had hundreds of years of people working manually and doing things, and suddenly you're going to expect that person who's used to chipping away on a bit of stone to press buttons on machines. I mean, you know, they probably did do it, and they probably had a lot of accidents and a lot of, you know, people injured and dying from it. But then that's where policies come in, and you refine things. And AI is going to be similar. You can have your best analyst and your best planner in your business doing something, and if they're putting the wrong things in and the wrong prompts and getting the wrong answers out, it's not going to help much. So you've got to have that set up. But it will, but things will evolve, won't they? Things will evolve. So that planning role, if I'm thinking about a manufacturing planner here. That planner role, they've been working on spreadsheets for 25 years. These spreadsheets are more convoluted than any of us could ever imagine in terms of the prompts and the calculations within it. They're just going to change that. They're now going to work with something AI-based, but their role will be far, far more to analyze the outcome and check it's right, rather than doing all the doing in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, this has been great conversation today. Thank you both for taking part in it. I'm sure people watching it will have more questions, which is great, because they can get in touch with any of us and ask those questions. Just to leave us today, then, one bit of advice from both of you in terms of, you know, where people should start. One thing that a company perhaps ought to do first now, if it's thinking about implementing AI through its working policies and procedures. Tom?
Okay, I mean, my go-to one is essentially to look at your business, whatever it is, and try and identify where you have kind of time sucks in what you do, that are those things that, like I said before, don't require you as an experienced individual with personality and things like that. So look at things within your business that are repetitive, boring, maybe data driven. They require a lot of copy and paste. Maybe you're duplicating work. Anything that you would likely hand off to a 16-year-old apprentice assistant kind of role. What are they? And if you can identify what they are, that's a good place to start looking at where AI can help you, because that's not going to affect jobs. It's going to make people's lives easier, and it's going to give them time then to focus on the stuff that they should be doing in their job, and have a bit more impact, rather than just the repetitive stuff that they would like to put off until next week.
That's brilliant. And if they want to have a conversation with someone that can be agnostic and to all of that, and actually be an outside pair of eyes, you're available to come and talk to them about that. And Paul,
yeah, of course.
What about you?
I think for me, it would be to put an AI usage policy in place, a new internal data protection policy. So if you're a bigger company, you'll have that, and make sure you've got a really clear policy. Make sure it's communicated clearly to staff. If you're a much smaller company, then just make sure you understand what you should and shouldn't be doing. You should train the staff, and you should if you're not going to train, you should at least brief the staff on what to do and not to do. And then, frankly, if you're not adding information in about how you use AI into your privacy notice to be transparent, then you're not acting legally under the law. And that sounds really heavy to end on, but make sure your privacy notices are updated. Make sure you're clear that you use AI or the AI system, and that people's data may be processed if that's what you're going to be doing.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And again, people, if you need actual personal advice on that, you've got a real person here that you can go and talk to, not just an AI bot. Thank you both for coming in and being part of that conversation today, and thank you for listening as well. If you're watching this on LinkedIn or you're listening to it somewhere else where I've put it out there, then thank you for spending the time with us today. If you've got any questions for anyone here today, do get in touch. Until next time, from all of us, bye for now.